Oh yeah, I want you to show me some of that high definition.
Welcome to another episode of Round the Clock Frights. I'm your host, the less popular version of the Crypt Keeper, the Tomb Watcher.
That was a really terrible impersonation. Welcome guys, as you can tell by the intro for this video, I have a bit of an obsession with my horror Blu-rays. Some would call it an unhealthy obsession. I just call it a hobby. But yes, welcome to yet another Blu-ray update video. If you guys were interested in watching the previous Blu-ray update videos, they are all on the channel. And please, if you like this, go ahead and subscribe to our channel for more horrific content. But yes, today I'm going to be talking about 20 horror Blu-rays that I have purchased over the past few months, and I'm really excited to talk about these because this Big Daddy in particular, this is one that I've been wanting to get my hands on for a while, and as you saw in the intro for this video, I've really been wanting to get my hands on it. I'm going to try to not make this creepy, but yes, I'm going to be talking about each film briefly and like what my overall thoughts are, and I'm also a really big fan of like Blu-ray cover art, especially if they use the cover art for the original posters, like the Blu-ray cover for Jaws 2. That is the original poster. It's just missing the tagline, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. But yes, let's go ahead and begin, guys, starting with the restored edition of An American Werewolf in London, one of the greatest werewolf movies of all time. Director John Landis actually made this after his hit film Animal House, and this was his first horror movie, and it is more of a horror comedy, but there actually are some truly horrific sequences in this movie, and I just gotta say, the werewolf transformation scenes still hold up today. They still look magnificent, even in high definition, like in the infamous transformation scene when David is just writhing on the floor. It still looks incredible. Like when they do the close-ups of his skin, it doesn't look like latex. It looks like human flesh. And it's just incredible. Like with some of these horror films, when they transfer them onto a Blu-ray disc, you can see the imperfections in like some of the prosthetics. Like in the first Friday the 13th movie, there's a couple of gory bits. In one scene, a girl gets her throat slashed, and you can tell that she has latex over her neck, and it doesn't look very good in high definition. But this film does look absolutely magnificent on Blu-ray. And I just have to say that the lead actress, Jenny Agutter, I think that's how you say her name. I used to get her confused with Diana Rigg, but she is one of the most attractive horror actresses to have ever walked this planet. And this movie also does have a very clever soundtrack. Every song in this movie has to do with the moon, or it has the word moon in the title, and it's just a really fun time. All right, moving on to a classic haunted house movie. This is the Amityville Horror, based off of a very popular novel, and much of the story behind the Amityville house has been debunked. You know, several people came forward and said that it was all a hoax. The people who wrote the book just wanted to, profit off of their experiences. But nevertheless, this is a pretty entertaining movie. I mean, compared to like some of the shit haunted house movies we get nowadays, like The Haunting in Connecticut, this movie is leaps and bounds better than those. And I just have to say, James Brolin gives a rather tragic performance because at the beginning of the film, he is a rather likable father. He's a very loving parent, and throughout the course of the film, we watch his sanity gradually decrease, and by the end, when he attempts to murder his family, it's just very heartbreaking. And Margot Kidder was always fabulous in every movie she appeared in. Like she was a classic Lois Lane in the Christopher Reeve movies, and she brought a lot of spunk to the character of Lois Lane, and she does the same thing in this movie. And she was also in the original Black Christmas, a movie that touched upon themes that honestly many horror films wouldn't dare touch upon, but I've already addressed that many times on this channel. But yes, the Amityville Horror, it's a classic haunted house feature, and I have to say that one sequence where the priest is, like in the room and it's just like engulfed in flies, that scene really gets under my skin because I have kind of a fear of insects, particularly winged insects, so I really feel bad for the priest in this scene when he is just getting swarmed by these disgusting flies. Oh my god, the Amityville Horror. And there's also that pig with the red glowing eyes. That pig is freaky as hell. All right, we gotta get. Okay, brain damage. This is a bizarre Frank Henenlotter film. Frank Henenlotter was kind of a guerrilla filmmaker. He would often film in New York City, and he didn't always have permission to film these movies. But brain damage is actually a pretty terrific metaphor for drug addiction. The main character in this movie, who, by the way, on this cover here, I always thought he looked a little bit like a young Jack Nicholson. He has kind of that Jack Nicholson look to him on this cover, but he gives a really terrific performance, and you just feel so bad for this guy because it's clear that he desperately wants to kick this addiction, but this parasite isn't letting him. This parasite is basically manipulating him, making him think that he needs the stimulants that it is providing for him, and it really isn't for everybody. I mean, Frank Henenlotter is kind of an acquired taste, but I personally like this film more than Basket Case, and definitely more than the Basket Case sequels. The Basket Case sequels are complete garbage, and just stay far away from them because you're not missing much. Okay, Crimson Peak. Now, this was a film that I really enjoyed upon first viewing. Guillermo del Toro is a true artist. His films are always visually stunning. And when I first saw this movie, I was really drawn into the storyline. And the funny thing is, when I watched it a second time, like it just didn't have, the same effect on me. It lost some of its staying power. In fact, throughout most of the film, I was thinking to myself, man, I remember this being a lot more thrilling than it is. And I mean, by the end, it does get a little bit more exciting. The end of the film is actually what I wish the entire film had been. It's a little bit more campy. It's definitely more violent. And I thought this was going to be more of an homage to those classic Hammer films. Many of those took place in like the Victorian era. And this film does as well. But this film, honestly, it's not really much of a horror movie until the climax, and that might turn some people off, but I still think it's pretty decent. Definitely not one of Del Toro's best. I would say that even the first Hellboy movie is better than Crimson Peak. I really like the Hellboy movies. I've actually always wanted to cosplay Ron Perlman's Hellboy, not David Harbour's Hellboy. That his version of Hellboy was basically a walking bloody turd. That's what David Harbour's Hellboy looked like. But yeah, to cosplay as Ron Perlman's Hellboy would be amazing, and I'd probably get a lot of attention. Okay, the Zack Snyder remake of Dawn of the Dead. It has one of the most effective horror openings of all time, and Zack Snyder, you can say whatever you want about the dude, but he knows how to make a terrific opening title sequence. The opening titles are set to Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around, and you see all of this documentary footage of the zombie apocalypse taking place, and it just feels so realistic, and it's just so gritty. And this film was also written by none other than James Gunn, who also directed the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, as well as Slither, a very underrated alien invasion movie. And it definitely has some of Gunn's quirky humor. Like there's one scene where a character is standing on top of a roof, or excuse me, a character is standing on top of a building with a sniper rifle, and he is pointing out zombies that resemble celebrities. Like, if I remember correctly, he points out a zombie who looks like Jay Leno. So it definitely has some of Gunn's weird humor in there. Okay, Deep Blue Sea. Now I have to point something out here. So look at the covers for Deep Blue Sea and Jaws 2. They look pretty similar, don't they? Many animal attack movies would feature just these gigantic predators on their posters, and they would often be going after these helpless women, and yeah, I don't know. I always thought that was kind of strange because when I was a little kid and I saw like the Jaws 2 poster. I thought the shark in this movie was going to be enormous. Like, I thought it was going to be like 50 feet long. I thought it was going to be a freaking megalodon, just by looking at the poster, but it wasn't. It was actually much tinier than this. And I know what the poster artists were trying to do. They were trying to sell the ferocity or the ferociousness of these animals. And anyway, I just had to point that out. Deep Blue Sea is a huge, huge guilty pleasure for me. I mean, first of all, everyone's talked about Samuel L. Jackson's infamous death in this movie, but no one talks about Stellan Skarsgård's death in this movie. There's a scene where a shark literally has Stellan Skarsgård in its mouth, and it is, swimming towards this glass window. And you just see poor Stellan Skarsgård like squirming in this shark's mouth as it approaches this window. And it's one of the most hysterical shots in all of cinema. And I mean, LL Cool J is in this movie, and he performs a rather terrible rap number during the end credits. Deep Blue Sea is cheesy fun. And, as it says here on the cover, bigger, smarter, faster, and meaner. Just like my ex-girlfriend. Whoop. Alright guys, so I've turned into a bit of a Mike Flanagan fanboy. I'm a huge fan of his work. I think he is one of the few modern directors working today who truly understands how to deliver an effective scare. Mike Flanagan will often have something scary just standing in the background. Like, he isn't prone to jump scares. He's much more subtle than that. And so when I heard that he was directing Dr. Sleep, the sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, I knew that he would be a perfect choice. And we did review this movie, and initially I said that it was kind of a mess. Like, it kind of struggled between being a Shining sequel and a standalone Mike Flanagan film. And I still kind of stand by that. There were certain sequences where it kind of feels like Flanagan is, I don't know, being forced to replicate Kubrick's vision. And I'm not talking about the scenes where he literally, recreates shots from The Shining. I'm just talking about, Flanagan has like his own distinct style. When you're watching a Mike Flanagan movie, you can tell that it's a Mike Flanagan movie. And when he tries to replicate Kubrick's style in this, I don't know. It just didn't always work for me. The two styles often clashed with one another. I haven't seen the extended cut of Dr. Sleep yet, but I heard it is actually pretty good, so I might have to check that out. And Ewan McGregor is fantastic in this movie, and Rebecca Ferguson, who plays the villain Rose the Hat, she is eerie as hell in this. And I've heard some people complain that she's too pretty or that she's too young looking, but honestly, that just adds to the terror, because you wouldn't expect someone like her to be so vicious and evil. So she lures you in with this false sense of security. And that's that one scene where the vampires kidnap Jacob Tremblay and torture him in the middle of nowhere. That scene, oh God. I've seen hundreds of horror films, and that scene really gets under my skin. I don't like watching that scene. All right, guys, moving on. Dog Soldiers. This was one of Neil Marshall's first films. It's about these badass Scottish soldiers who basically get lost in the wilderness, and they end up being hunted by werewolves. Now, something Marshall did that was very clever. He didn't have the biggest budget for this movie, so when he shows the werewolves, it's very minimal. Like, they'll often be like in the shadows, or they'll often appear in these quick cuts, but the editing isn't obnoxious, because you do get the sense that these werewolves are vicious, fast creatures. So when they, flash, when they flash on the screen, it's not irritating. It just makes you feel like they're moving really fast. And Dog Soldiers might be one of the best hybrids of action and horror since Predator. I really like Predator, and honestly, I like Dog Soldiers almost as much as that movie. And also Sean Pertwee. Is that how you say his name? Yeah, Sean Pertwee. He played a very gritty version of Alfred Pennyworth in the TV show Gotham, which is essentially the origin story for Batman. And he is a hard ass in that show. Like his take on Alfred is just so it's unlike any Alfred that we've seen before. Like he's not droll. He comes across as this wounded war vet. It's a very different take for Alfred. Anyway, I'm a huge Batman fanboy, but Dog Soldier is definitely worth checking out. There's some very well constructed action bits, and the werewolf sequences are also very very well executed. Alright, guys, one of the most underrated horror sequels of all time, The Exorcist 3, directed by William Peter Blatty himself, the author of the Exorcist novel. And, for this being one of his only films as a director, he did a very impressive job with this movie. Honestly, I like to think of this as the true Exorcist sequel, not Exorcist 2 The Heretic. That film was just abhorrent. It was just exceedingly awful. The Exorcist 3, it might be too much of a slow burn for some people, but honestly, it's more of a character study. It follows George C. Scott as this kind of world-weary detective, and he's trying to solve, this case, and he comes across the infamous Gemini killer, played by both Jason Miller and my man Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky the Killer Doll. Brad Dourif is terrifying as hell in this movie. He is completely unhinged. Like, he will often just look directly into the camera and scream. And he has those just piercing eyes. Oh my god, Brad Dourif is incredible in this movie. In fact, when I watch him in this, I was reminded a little bit of Heath Ledger's Joker, particularly in the scenes where Heath Ledger is locked up in prison and, they're trying to interrogate him. Brad Dourif plays one of the most terrifying serial killers in all of cinema. And I don't say that lightly, because this is the man who voiced Chucky for decades. This also has one of the most famous jump scares of all time. And you know which one I'm talking about. It's the jump scare that takes place in the hospital. When you see the empty hallway and, the nurse enters one room and then she walks out of it and the camera snap zooms and you see the shrouded white figure, chasing her with a pair of shears. Oh man, that's how you do a jump scare, ladies and gentlemen. That is how you do a jump scare. All right. And to finish off this first pile, we have Horror of Dracula. This is probably my favorite of the Hammer series. It's kind of a tie between this and The Mummy. Ironically, Christopher Lee played the antagonist in both of those films. He plays a very good Dracula in this movie. This movie isn't an entirely faithful adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel. In fact, it eliminates quite a bit. But what it leaves in, man, it still gets the job done. And Christopher Lee is a very different Dracula than, say, Bela Lugosi. Dracula was always described as this kind of calm, subdued gentleman type, and Christopher Lee definitely nailed those aspects of the character, because throughout much of the movie, he is very calm. He's very stoic and he doesn't say much, but when he does, it gets under your skin. It unnerves you. Christopher Lee, rest in peace, sir. You were magnificent in these Dracula movies, and also the color. It just pops out at you. I love the color in this movie. It is just a feast for the eyes. I love it. Now, I already talked a little bit about Jaws 2, particularly the cover. This really isn't that bad of a sequel. I mean, comparing it to the first Jaws, the first Jaws is a masterpiece. It is a perfectly paced, nail-biting thriller, and Jaws 2 was a bit disappointing to many moviegoers, and compared to the first film, it is a bit underwhelming. And I think the biggest problem with this movie, the reason the first Jaws movie worked was because you had that camaraderie between Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss. They had tremendous chemistry together, and you just loved watching them on screen. They worked very well off of each other. But in this movie, you only have Roy Scheider, and God bless Roy Scheider. I love him. He was a really amazing actor, but unfortunately, he just wasn't enough to save this sequel. And also, they do this stupid thing where they scar, one half of the shark's face, to make him look more like a horror villain. Like he kind of resembles Freddy Krueger in this movie, and he just looks ridiculous. And God, compared, God, it's also incredibly formulaic. I mean, it's another example of all these horny teenagers who go off by themselves to get drunk and screw one another, and they eventually get picked off one by one by this malicious presence. In this case, that malicious presence is the shark, and actually, that's pretty original. I've never seen a horror movie in which a bunch of stupid, horny teenagers get attacked by an evil force. That's very unfamiliar to me. They should do that more in the horror genre. As you can tell, I'm totally joking because, man, the fact that they used that tired story element in this movie, a sequel to Jaws, one of the greatest films of all time, it's disheartening. And the young actor who plays Brody's older son is atrocious. He is so wooden and bland. Honestly, he was kind of the precursor to Hayden Christensen, who played Anakin Skywalker in the Star Wars prequels. But yes, that's all I got to say about Jaws 2. Jaws 3, it has, I wasn't Randy Quaid, it has Dennis Quaid, and the climax, which takes place at SeaWorld, is kind of amusing, but yeah, we don't talk about this film, and we certainly don't talk about Jaws the Revenge. The only reason I own Jaws 3 and Jaws the Revenge is because I'm a completionist, and honestly, I'd kind of like to get revenge on this movie by throwing it into the fireplace, because this is a truly horrendous horror sequel. In fact, it has one of the most baffling lines of dialogue I've ever heard in a feature film. There's one scene where the older brother is hitting on this lady, and he has like this blowtorch in his hand, and he says something along the lines of, "I've always wanted to make love to an angry welder. I've dreamt of nothing else since I was a small boy." Oh, 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 God. George Lucas himself could not have written a better line than that. My God. Putting this away. Like I said, I own them because I'm a completionist. All right? Don't hate me. Don't be hating. All right, guys. Midsommar. Now, me and my friend Brian did do a review of this movie. This movie is very similar to the original Wicker Man. These tourists visit this Swedish village, and it turns out that the people who live in this village are cultists, very violent cultists. And even the ending of this movie where they put the idiot boyfriend in that bear suit. I mean, come on, Nicolas Cage did that in the 2006 remake of Wicker Man, so that did get a giggle out of me. Nevertheless, Ari Aster is a filmmaker who pulls no punches. There's a scene where these two old people basically jump off of a cliff, and we see in great detail how they meet their demise. Their faces get smashed in by the boulders below them, and it is just grotesque, and oh my God. I wouldn't call Ari Aster a master of the horror genre, at least not yet. He's made 2 good films so far, this and Hereditary, but I give him a bit more time. I don't think you can call anyone a master if they've only made 2 films. At least that's my opinion. All right, getting to the last few titles here, we have The Monster Squad, which is basically a fun 80s mashup of all these classic monsters. Have Dracula, the Mummy, the Werewolf, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein's monster. And this is also back when little kids were allowed to swear in movies. Like the little sister in this movie calls the boys chicken shit, which got a pretty big laugh out of me. And the actor who plays Dracula in this movie is actually pretty effective. He is a bit hammy, but he's still intimidating. And I mean, I love any movie that features a gang of misfits coming together to fight an evil force. In this case, you have these quirky, adolescent boys, and I love that scene where they are looking for a virgin, and they approach this older boy in like a restaurant, and they just ask him straight out, "Do you know any virgins?" And he spits out his drink. Oh my god, Monster Squad, love it. All right, guys. I also picked up the Omen Collection. Now, I really only wanted the first film, but I've been wanting to watch the rest of the films in this series. The Omen, I've argued this before. The Omen is a film that works primarily because of its musical score. Jerry Goldsmith delivered a haunting score for this movie. I mean, Gregory Peck, he does play a bit of a tragic character. I mean, as a father, would you be so willing to kill your son, even if you discovered that he was the Antichrist? I mean, it would be very difficult. And Gregory Peck, you know, Gregory Peck is terrific in this movie. And you just feel so bad for him because he has to do the unthinkable as a parent. And it's just heartbreaking. I will be checking out the other sequels eventually, but this was only $12.99, so I picked it up. All right, guys, another perennial Halloween classic. We have Pumpkinhead, directed by the late great Stan Winston. Now, Pumpkinhead has one of the greatest practical monsters in all of horror. I mean, you watch this film and you totally buy that this is a living, breathing creature. It has not aged a day, and you do feel incredibly sorry for Lance Henriksen in this movie. I mean, his son dies in the first act, and you totally understand why he would want to summon this evil force to pick off the people responsible for his son's death. And it's a terrific transfer, and Lance Henriksen is one of those actors who always gives 110%. So whenever he, is the lead in a movie, I'll most likely enjoy it. I mean, of course, we all know him as Bishop from James Cameron's Aliens, but throughout most of his career, he was mostly known as the character actor, like the supporting character actor, but he does play the lead in this movie, and he's very, very good. Actually, he deserves more credit than he's got over the years. I actually really like Lance Henriksen. All right, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the long-awaited adaptation of the classic book. The book that was supposedly written for children, although if you look at the illustrations in those books, they're pretty out there. They certainly haunted my nightmares when I was a kid. Even though the stories themselves were kind of cheesy and kind of goofy, the illustrations were so just spine-tingling. But yeah, this was a pretty decent movie. I mean, some people have argued it should have been more of an anthology instead of a single narrative, which I can kind of agree with. But the monsters are just amazing in this movie. The monsters look like they were ripped straight out of the pages of the book. And oh my god, that one scene like in the hallway where where everything is just like red, like they just bathed the scene in this crimson light, and you see the fat lady, walking slowly down the hallway. That scene is one of the most unsettling things I've seen in horror in many years. And it goes back to the idea that good horror isn't always about the jump scare. You can have something scary looking at the end of a hallway, and that can be just as effective. And the reason why scenes like that are so effective is because it's not about the jolt. It's about the buildup. It's about seeing this terrifying looking creature slowly walking towards you, and you can't do a damn thing about it because every time you turn around, it is just getting closer and closer. And I heard they're making a sequel to this movie, and I would definitely see it. I mean, it's not great. It's slightly above average, though. Should it have been an anthology? Sure. But for what we got, I was pretty satisfied. Also, Harold the Scarecrow. A bit scarier than Russell Scarecrow over here, that's for sure. Russell, please don't come to life and chase me through a cornfield. I love you, man. All right, guys. Lucio Fulci's Zombie. Lucio Fulci was another filmmaker who did not pull any punches. He also had an obsession with eyeballs. There's that infamous scene where a woman's head, oh my god, a woman's head is being pushed towards this wood splinter, and we see in grisly detail this splinter just going through her eyeball. And what's so bad about that scene is that her head is moving very slowly, so we have to endure every painful second. Oh my god, it's so torturous. And I mean, yeah, this movie is a bit cheesy, but I mean, he always went all out with the gore, and I'll definitely take this over The Beyond. The Beyond is a film that I'm not the biggest fan of. This movie also has one of the most amazing ending shots in all of horror. The shot on the bridge where you see this army of zombies basically marching towards the city. I love that ending shot. And Italian horror, they didn't have to worry about studio restraints. They could just go all out, which I really admire them for. All right, boys and ghouls, we've come to the big one. The reason that I wanted to make this video in the first place, I have the Friday the 13th collection on Blu-ray, the deluxe edition released by Scream Factory. Now, I know some of you are going to point this out, so I'll just address it up front. I know that some of these discs are a bit defective, particularly Jason X. I know Jason X has some audio issues, and I just have to say this. I have ordered my replacement discs. They are on the way, so yes, I know about the problems, and don't worry, I am getting them fixed. Anyway, I absolutely adore this collection. This was a Christmas gift to me from my lovely wife. Thank you so much, sweetie. I absolutely adore it. I mean, you could tell in the intro to this video that I really love this collection here. But like the Halloween Blu-ray collection, they gave each film its own case. And they mostly use the original posters for these movies. And I just have to say this. Jason X is one of my favorites of the franchise. I mean, it is just so terrible, but it knows it's terrible. I mean, you have that android chick firing at Jason with a pair of machine guns, and oh my god, you have one of the best kills in the franchise, that moment where Jason takes that blonde girl's head and dunks it into a sink of frozen liquid. I forget exactly what it's called. And then he just takes her frozen skull and smashes it onto the counter. It's just mind-blowing, literally. Jason X. It also has a cameo by renowned director David Cronenberg. I mean, come on. Also, I really enjoy Part 3, Part 4, and Jason Takes Manhattan, I actually really enjoy as well. And Freddy vs. Jason, which me and Kim did review. And actually, the remake, Friday the 13th, 2009, actually wasn't all that bad. I had heard a lot of complaints for the remake, and yeah, it did go a bit over the top, particularly in the sex department. But I mean, comparing it to remakes like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or 2013's Carrie, I thought the Friday the 13th remake was watchable. I tolerated it. And yeah, actually, when it comes to the Friday the 13th films, I don't really care that much for the first film. I mean, it's not just the fact that Jason isn't even the killer in the first film. It's the fact that the film is just so dull. And personally, I think it would have worked better if Jason's mother had been introduced earlier as a red herring. Because, if we had seen her as this nice, camp employee who interacts with some of the kids, and, she's seen as the kind, motherly type, then I think the ending would have been a lot more shocking. But they just kind of threw her in there in the last 15 to 20 minutes, and I don't know, I think it would have been better if they had introduced her earlier. But I mean, this isn't quality cinema or anything. These are the ultimate guilty pleasures, but Scream Factory did a terrific job packaging these movies. I love this. I love the art style. It kind of reminds me of Drew Struzan, the man who was responsible for many classic movie posters. I just love this set. I really do. So yes, thank you again to my wife for purchasing this for me. But guys, those are all the Blu-rays that I have acquired these past few months. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and what Blu-rays have you gotten your hands on recently? I would love to know in the comments down below. Now, real quick, stick around because I do have a blooper reel for you guys. I do have some alternate takes from today's shoot. that I think you might enjoy. So stick around for those bloopers. And guys, thank you so much for joining me in my discussion. And it's 2021. It's the new year, and I'm definitely feeling optimistic. I know we kind of got off to a bit of a bumpy start, but I just want to assure you that Round the Clock Frights is a safe zone for all of you horror fans out there. And I would love to hear from all of you, honestly. Tell me what some of your favorite horror films are. What do you like? What do you like to watch? What recommendations do you have for me and my cohorts? I would love to hear from you. And again, if you like this, please subscribe to our channel for more horrific content. And as always, guys, have a very scary day and happy Blu-ray hunting. All right, guys, take care. And here's that blooper reel for you. Oh, yeah. Thor! Oh, yeah. I'm going to insert your discs into my Blu-ray player. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to hit the pause button when you're playing. Oh, yeah, Friday the 13th. You bury that machete into my head. Oh, yeah. Jason X, more like Jason Triple X. Jason, you want to play hockey with me? I'll be your puck, and you just hit me right into that goal. Cut.